Hi guys, and thank you for tuning in to a new video. Alright, so in this one we are going to be covering environmental regulations, and I literally made this freaking notes breakdown extremely extensive, so throughout this video I'm literally going to just literally read through the entire thing because it's like I would say a total of like 8 pages of notes, so it'll definitely take an hour to get through, which would be freaking great in itself because the notes basis literally covers the standard for everything that should be broken down. So we should be able to read through this and have all the guided information provided throughout. Alright, so starting with the first section, you guys ready? Here are some environmental regulations that businesses must comply with. The Clean Air Act, which was passed in 1963. This act aims to improve the health of citizens and the environment through scientific research and regulatory oversight, providing the basis for setting a standard of ensuring that companies adhere to the clean air protocols to set that environmental protectorate for all who are within societies. That way we aren't freaking, heading outside one day and it's like, air pollution has freaking taken place and what is the major cause for it? And it's like, well, there was a company that was literally just completely just going against the freaking air pollution freaking standards, and they've been doing it for so freaking long that our air freaking quality in this area is freaking just contaminated. The freaking rainfall is acidic, and so many freaking other standards that fall within that breakdown of contaminants that can pollute the freaking air. The Clean Air Act (CAA) is a federal law that regulates air emissions and aims to reduce air pollution in the United States. The purpose? The CAA's purpose is to protect public health and the environment by regulating all sources of air emissions. The history is as stated. The CAA was first enacted in 1963 and has been amended many times since. The responsibilities are as follows. The CAA gives the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, the authority to establish air pollution standards. The CAA also requires states to develop plans to reduce emissions and meet the standards set by the EPA. The standards are as follows. The CAA sets national ambient air quality standards, NAAQS, to protect public health and the environment. The CAA also includes regulations to prevent significant air quality deterioration in areas that already meet the NAAQS. Pollutants. The CAA regulates many common air pollutants, and this is going to include like some of the major ones that fall within the regulatory standards. Nitrogen oxides, sulfide dioxide, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, which you all know of, volatile organic compounds, ozone pollutants such as the freaking hairspray scandals over the past freaking few, I would say, I think it was like maybe like 2 decades ago or so, where there was the hairspray that was polluting the freaking ozone and causing the freaking hole within the ozone. And then once the freaking product that was doing so was freaking regulated and the freaking pollutant that was contained within it was freaking regulated, the ozone started to literally like slowly recover. But it was like pinpointing the cause for it and figuring out what could have been taking place on the planet that could have been causing the freaking ozone to literally deplete. Was it something that was going on outside of the planet? Was it something that we were doing? And then in doing so, we were able to pinpoint the pollutant that caused it. And lead. The benefits include a report commissioned by the NRDC found that the annual benefits of clean air standards are up to 32 times greater than their costs. And then in the next section, we are going to cover the Clean Water Act. This act sets standards for water quality and issues pollution permits. The Clean Water Act, CWA, is the primary federal law in the United States that regulates water pollution. It was passed in 1972 as a rewrite of the 1948 Federal Water Pollution Control Act, FWPCA. The goal is as follows. The CWA's goal is to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters. Protections include the CWA includes a permit system for controlling pollutant releases, the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency (EPA) to control water pollutants, The authority of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, USACE, to regulate dredged and fill material. A role for states in controlling pollution and participating in the federal permitting process. A prohibition on discharging pollutants without a permit. Strict liability, meaning no need to prove intent or causation. The enforcement standards are as follows. The CWA includes compliance monitoring, including investigations and inspections, water enforcement also. And then in the next breakdown, we are going to cover the Endangered Species Act. This act is designated to protecting life besides mankind. The Endangered Species Act, ESA, is a law that protects endangered and threatened species and their habitats. The purpose is as follows. The ESA was passed in 1973 to protect species from extinction and to conserve the ecosystems they depend on. The administration standards are as follows. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, USFWS, and the National Marine Fisheries Service, NMFS, are responsible for administering the ESA. Listings are as follows. Species can be listed as endangered or threatened. Endangered means the species is in danger of extinction, while threatened means it's likely to become endangered in the near future. So there is the time to prevent it from taking place, but these are the species that we must be leery of and that we must work to protect before they become endangered. Protection standards and regulations are as follows. Once a species is listed, it receives protective measures such as restriction on transportation, sale, or taking. The government can also purchase important habitats and develop recovery plans. So in doing so, as you guys have noticed, there have been a lot of standards where we literally work towards preserving endangered species, setting them within guided areas that are protected, setting these standards and regulations to ensure that the endangered species are freaking noted to members of the public so that they are aware of like standards such as, hunting restrictions, and are able to freaking understand the adherence and needs for not freaking, polluting the environment in which the animals live within. If you pollute the animal reserve freaking spot and you literally make it a dangerous environment for the species to freaking survive, you literally freaking push it towards extinction. And in doing so, you literally just completely set the basis for not adhering to the protocols and guidelines that we've set forth. And in doing so, you can bring about the freaking death of an entire species. So we literally work towards preventing that, and we work towards preventing people feeling as though, they may be able to do so by setting regulations to prevent such things from taking place. Cooperation standards are as follows. The ESA encourages cooperation with other nations and non-federal partners to develop conservation plans. The effectiveness. The ESA is considered one of the most effective conservation laws in the United States. It's estimated to have prevented the extinction of 99% of listed species. So in doing so, we've been able to preserve the life of a lot of different species, which is freaking great overall because we have been able to ensure that our species throughout the country are freaking thriving. They are freaking found throughout the freaking regions. Although we have freaking moments when we're like, there's a freaking bear on the loose, we literally still can say that we have our freaking natural species preserved throughout the country. We have several different freaking categories of the same freaking species of animal that literally are preserved and protected throughout the country and that are loved by so many of our freaking citizens, which helps us all to create a conducive environment for these species to live and thrive within, while also living harmoniously with us, which is freaking great in itself. So, yay to us. California, so this is for my fellow Californians. California also has an Endangered Species Act, the CESA, that protects plant and animal species at risk of extinction. Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. This one is going to start off our next section. The RCRA, This act governs the disposal of solid and hazardous waste. It sets national goals of protecting human health and the natural environment from the potential hazards of waste disposal, conserving energy and natural resources, reducing the amount of waste generated through source reduction and recycling, and ensuring the management of waste in an environmentally sound manner. Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act of 1980, CERCLA, also known as the Superfund. This act is aimed at cleaning up areas which are already polluted. The Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, CERCLA, also known as Superfund, is a federal law that gives the government the authority to clean up and regulate hazardous waste sites. The purpose: the CERCLA was passed in 1980 to address the environmental and health risks of hazardous substances released into the environment. The law was a response to the discovery of several highly contaminated sites in the 1970s, such as Love Canal, Times Beach, Valley of the Drums, and Tolo Pig Farm. Tolo Pig Farm. Responsibilities. The CERCLA gives the EPA the power to identify potentially responsible parties, PRPs, for environmental contamination. Force PRPs to clean up. Okay, so in doing so, it sets the standards for forcing PRPs or potentially responsible parties to clean up or pay damages to clean up contaminated sites. Creates the Hazardous Substance Superfund to provide funds to clean up sites without a responsible party. So in situations where there is no responsible party that can cover the fund expenditures to clean up the hazardous materials that have caused the contamination and pollution, we literally have the funding to literally create guided teams to work to contain the hazardous pollutants. The enforcement standards are as follows. The EPA can seek penalties of $32,500 to $37,500 per day of noncompliance. Site evaluation standards are as follows. The EPA and state agencies use the Hazard Ranking System HRS to calculate a site score for each site. A score of 28.5 or higher places the site on the national priorities list and makes it eligible for cleanup. Other laws include. I can't believe I'm at the 12-minute mark. I felt like I was probably good. I feel like I'd be nearly at like the 30-minute breaking point by now. Other laws. Several other laws have amended CERCLA, including the Superfund Amendments and Reauthorization Act of 1986, SARA. Toxic Substances Control Act of 1976, TCSA. This act regulates the production, importation, use, and disposal of chemicals such as lead-based paint and asbestos, as you each know, are linked to freaking terminal illnesses and cancers. The Toxic Substances Control Act, TSCA, of 1976 is a law that gives the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, the authority to regulate chemicals in the United States. Chemical testing standards are as follows. Requires chemicals to be tested for toxicity before they are sold to consumers. So we need to know what you are going to be selling to consumers. If it's freaking toxic, what freaking pollutants can be found within it, what announcements are going to be made. So for products such as cigarettes, there are the freaking notions as to how it can cause cancer, how it should not be freaking consumed by anybody who's pregnant. Let's see, for alcohol, same standard for, it shouldn't be consumed by anybody who's pregnant. We have warnings all throughout our freaking country pertaining towards, regulations. Don't freaking drink and drive. Or you'll be pulled over, you'll be fined, you can have your license suspended, you can be jailed. Like, there are standards and regulations that we set and force to ensure that these things do not take place, and in doing so, it's not literally just to freaking, throw the book at people. It's literally to set a standard of, preventing things that take place like all the freaking time, and in doing so, ensuring that your lives will be preserved by the standards that we are set to uphold. Chemical tracking requires the EPA to track and report chemicals that may be hazardous to human health or the environment. Chemical importing and exporting allows the EPA to oversee the importation of chemicals and regulate their use. Chemical research standards requires the EPA to oversee commercial chemical research and identify any significant risks. Chemical inventory requires the EPA to assess and update the inventory of existing chemicals. The TSCA was signed into law by President General Gerald Ford on October 11, 1976. It is still in effect today, but some say that the law is weak and ineffective. For example, the TSCA did not require manufacturers to test or provide data about the health impact of chemicals before they were sold in the United States. The EPA also couldn't effectively regulate chemicals with known adverse health effects, such as asbestos and methylene chloride. In 2016, the Frank-Lautenberg amendments to the TCSA were passed, giving the EPA new authorities and requirements. These amendments were designed to modernize the U.S. industrial chemical policy to promote health. Alright, so now we're going to cover the FIFRA, Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. This act regulates registration, sale, and use of pesticides. The Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, FIFRA, is a U.S. law that regulates the sale, distribution, and use of pesticides. The purpose is as follows. FIFRA protects the environment, consumers, and applicators by establishing a risk and benefit standard for pesticides. Registration. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, registers pesticides before they can be sold or distributed in the U.S. So in doing so, we kind of literally set the standard for, again, checking for any potential hazard that can be found within the products, the adverse risks that can take place, such as, the Roundup settlements that are going on throughout the country that take place like literally every year. It's constantly like an ongoing thing to literally joint settlements get the compensation that you're due to receive due to using pesticides that have been linked to causing cancer. So in doing so, we literally are working to create a set standard for new products being released and ensure that pesticides and insecticides, rodenticides, and other control freaking substances that are set to freaking, prevent pests are regulated to prevent the adverse risks that they can cause to humans and other species that fall within the parameters of protected freaking species and fall within the parameters of protecting our freaking home environment and life itself. The labeling standards. The EPA approves labels for registered pesticides, and these labels are legally binding. So these labels are set to cover these standards that literally adhere to providing any guidelines pertaining towards the product and setting any breaking warnings that must be stated to any users of the products. Enforcement. The EPA enforces FIFRA, and violators may face civil or criminal penalties. So, in violating this act, you can literally face penalties, fines, or criminal charges, which can lead to freaking years in prison. So, be mindful of always adhering to the laws, standards, and regulations of the act set to preserve the lives of everyone within the country. And also, whenever starting a new freaking venture or starting to freaking work on a new project with your teams, make sure that everybody is hip to freaking following these standards and the laws. And then if there are any aspects where you're like, well, that sounds like a bit off, make sure you tell everybody to go freaking check the rule book and to make sure that every freaking protocol and guideline is freaking followed, because regulatory freaking standards will always be enforced. The scope outlook. FIFRA applies to all types of pesticides, including herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, rodenticides, and antimicrobials. The history. FIFRA was passed in 1947 and has been amended several times, most recently by the Food Quality Protection Act of 1996. Occupational Safety and Health Act, the OSHA breakdown. This is going to be covering our next section. This act requires employers to provide workers with a safe workplace. The OSHA Act of 19 oh wait, hold on. The OSH Act of 1970 was enacted to assure safe and healthful working conditions for working individuals. This includes authorizing enforcement of standards developed under the act, assisting and encouraging states in their efforts to assure health and healthful working conditions. The NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. This act ensures the government considers environmental impact before making important decisions. The National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, is a law that requires federal agencies to consider the environmental impact of their actions before making decisions. NEPA was signed into law by President Nixon in 1970 and was the first major environmental law in the United States. NEPA's goals include protecting the environment for current and future generations, encouraging harmony between humans and the environment, establishing the Council on Environmental Quality, CEQ. NEPA requires federal agencies to assess the environmental impact of major actions, document their analysis, make the analysis available to the public for comment. NEPA is considered the Magna Carta of federal environmental laws. Magna Carta was issued, and this one is a fun little snippet that I was like, I'm just going to add in there, in June of 1215, and was the first document to put into writing the principle that the king and his government was not above the law. It sought to prevent the king from exploiting his power and place limits of royal authority by establishing laws as a power in itself. And I think that's like the end of it, you guys. Oh my gosh, look at us. I thought it literally kept saying that I was on page number freaking 4, so I was like, they're about to like a few more freaking slides to go through. And then I was like, I just like went through page 4 and like I should be on page 5 like a few freaking pages ago. But that's the end of it, and we finished that like under freaking 30 minutes. Look at us. Great job. Alright, you guys, I love you, and I will talk to you later. Don't forget to go check us out on social media. We are on Instagram, DKHLegalAid, X, DKHLegalAid, and TikTok, DKH.legal.aid. And go check out our website and book us for an educational consultation, or book me for some private investigative services, or some legal freaking case freaking updates, guidance, counseling, or anything that may pertain towards freaking help pertaining towards criminal breaking cases and understanding any type of standards. And you can also freaking drop some freaking updates on potential freaking video topics and so many other fun freaking breakdowns. I love you guys, and I'll talk to you later.